Yeah,
Thanks for being on the show today. Thanks for coming on.
no problem, man. I appreciate the opportunity to hang out and talk and chat and see what we can impart on the world as far as some knowledge is concerned. So,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, for those who don't know, have no information, haven't done their research about you, can you give a little bit of your background, a little bit of detail of what you do, how you do it, what you've been up to?
yeah, so, my name is Hakim Isler, aka people call me the Black MacGyver. Um, and I am a all things survival type guy. I train people in different aspects of survival, whether it be self defense, whether it be surviving off grid, whether it be surviving on grid, whether it be mental or psychological survival, and all things considering, the I kind of follow what I call the ancient man concept, which is,
Right.
with ancient men and women, the idea was that survival was a holistic thing. It wasn't like they just needed to eat. It wasn't like they just needed to sleep. It wasn't like
Mhm.
in that process. And so that's what I focus on.
Okay, cool. So, how did you get started in survival and the preparedness aspect?
So I think the funniest part is I was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey. So that was the first aspect of survival. It's just,
Yeah.
how do I walk out my front door and stay active and alive?
Right,
Um,
right.
but I got my first training. I call it in the urban jungle, and then I started to move to a more full on training approach where I got like different aspects of training. And
Hmm.
really, the martial arts is kind of what really started it for me. Um,
Hmm.
and at some point, I joined or I got into my mind that martial arts was going to be the thing for me. It was going to give me the aspect that I needed to grow in the world and take things to a new level. But I needed to figure out what type of martial arts that was going to be. And a friend of mine had recommended, and I heard about this ninja, and I was like, wow, ninja are real? Like, what's that about? And so
Right.
I looked it up, and through a bunch of auspicious circumstances, I came across this guy who lived in Ohio named Stephen K. Hayes, and he was the first American to go to Japan and train in the ninja art and bring it back to America. And so I said to myself, well, I started reading about the ninja, learning about the ninja, and these guys were like Japan's greatest survivalists. And actually, in my new book, Ninja Survival, the subtitle is that, Japan's
Right.
greatest survivalists. And they had this very holistic approach to survival. This idea of mental, emotional, physical, interactive,
Mhm.
and I was like, man, I got to go train with this guy. So I went for 2 weeks to Ohio to train with him, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, this is where I need to be. And
Wow.
went back to Jersey, told my mom and my friends that I was gonna pack up and move to Ohio, and everybody was like, "That sounds cool, but for what?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go and train to be a ninja." And people just thought I was nuts. They were like, "This
Right.
guy." I'm 20, 21 years old at the time, and I'm like, I'm gonna save up. I had no money in the bank. It took me almost a year to save up $1,300, little bit over $1,200 to kind of make the move. And
Hmm.
I lived in the ghetto of Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, and I had like a 200 and something dollar apartment. Didn't even know it. Didn't even know enough that I had to get my electricity turned on. So when I got there, it was like I had no power, and I was just like, "What's this? Oh, you got a
Wow.
power company to get your power turned on? Oh yeah, that's the thing." You know?
Or the cable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it was like it was like actually I don't even know. Yeah, I think cable was a thing back then. I don't even really know anymore. That was
Right,
like
right.
25 years ago. So
Yeah.
24 years.
Yeah. So with all your experience and your background, for people just getting started in survival and or preparedness, what are the most important key things that you think somebody should know getting started?
Mm. That's a good question. I just before we had this online, I was or this live, I was writing about that. So it's really funny that you should ask that.
Yeah.
You know, people get overwhelmed. It's a huge market now. There's a lot of people getting involved in it. There's a lot of different things to know, and really, you really need to know where you stand. What don't you know? Like, what don't you know that you need to know? And so one of the things that I tell people with is just start with the foundation of what you need, what you know you need as a human being to live, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I know that I need water and I know I need food and I know I need shelter. I mean, that's on every survival list out there. Um,
Right.
but what does that mean to you? Are you out in the middle of the country? Are you in an urban environment? Are you in a suburban environment? What does that mean for you? Are you in an apartment, high rise, you know, or something
Right.
that? Um, so water is going to be tricky for you if you live in like, you know, a high rise, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden the water goes out or it goes bad, you know, and I'm on the 100th floor, you know, like how do I deal with
Right.
that on a consistent
Yeah.
basis? That may be a little bit tricky, but if you live out in the woods and you got a well, you know, water is not as big of an issue for you unless
Mm-hmm.
that well gets contaminated. If you're in an urban environment, but you're in like a condominium complex, you know, it might be a little bit different for you. So first you have to take each one of those avenues and say, okay, what's the most important thing that I would need to survive?
Right.
Thermal regulation being a really important one. If the power goes out and it's cold outside, how do I do that if I don't have a fireplace or something of that nature? And how do I do that safely where I don't burn down the whole building? Um,
Right.
then water is, you know, another major one. And then, so how would I get my water on a consistent basis? Yeah, I may have some bottles stacked up in the corner, but is it enough? Is it enough for me to do these things? And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say start there. Start with you have the foundation. Every human being knows the foundation of what we need to survive. And then how do I prepare that based on my personal environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I gave those examples. If I live out in the boonies, you know, it may be a little bit different because I have a well. If I live, you know, an apartment complex, may it'll be a little bit different. If I live in the suburbs, it may be a little bit different, you know. So just keep those things into perspective. Put those things
Yeah.
in perspective.
No, that's good. That's good. The points that you make are very good because people live in different environments. People live in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. So depending on where you are, what type of climate you have, and different activities that surround you, you know, that's going to affect the way you prepare for that
Mm-hmm.
event. So speaking of events, you know, we had this pandemic in the past few months. What were some of the things that you took precautions in while uh, these few months have passed, and going forward, what things have you prepared for this pandemic?
That's a great question. I mean, there's so many different levels to it when it comes down to preparation, because I think the scary thing about the pandemic is we don't really know when it's going to end, right? So people were predicting a long time ago, oh, this will just go right by, we'll be over
Right.
with. A matter of fact, some people thought it wasn't even a thing. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, it's it's bad, but it's like the
Brush
flu.
it off.
It's not going to be, you know, it's going to be seasonal, and when it gets warm out, it's going to go away. Um,
Right.
but it didn't. It stuck
Right.
around, and then all of a sudden, things that people never thought were possible. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, you can't go into a store without a mask on, and you can't do this without this, and you can't do
Yeah.
that. And like literally all your business, all these businesses are going to shut down tomorrow, like and stay
Right.
shut down. And people, you know, I don't think anyone in our lifetime would ever have fathomed that that would really happen. You had people who were us disaster preparedness folks. We were saying stuff could happen, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone ever really was getting it. And now they get it, and
Right.
now it's just a conundrum of continuation where you just continue to have it getting longer and longer and longer and
Right.
prolonged. I mean, we're in our seventh month now or something like that. And, you know,
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's like people weren't really aware of how much they should be prepared for certain
mm-hmm,
situations up
mm-hmm,
until the last couple of months. So now it's becoming a normalcy for people to get into this environment of preparedness, and people are asking more questions, and people are doing certain things, and
Yeah.
tweaking their life to a way that, hey, this might come up again. I might need this for an emergency. Let's be prepared. So I've seen that as a current theme now. You know, it's been a huge wave, like you said, of new people getting into the survival and preparedness area because of what happened in the past few months.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's not just the pandemic, you know, it's the all the other layers that we have with, you know,
right.
the riots and, now, so you have that going on and you have people politically on all these different sides and, you have,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just crazy right now. So it's
Right.
like, and it is like, it's like you're reading a survival novel, right? Like, like we're living in, so like you couldn't
Right.
write a better story than what's happening in the last 7 months, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
With the exception of like some foreign invader coming and doing something, but
Mhm.
it's an argument, or it's arguable to say that is that there's some questions about where the pandemic came from and how that
Mhm.
came, so
Right.
could it be really an invasion? We don't even know, but a different
Right.
type, because nobody, I mean, very few people are going to like try to like land on, well, let me take that back. No one's going to land on like American soil tomorrow and like fight us, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So more of these indirect ways to attack might be it. So who knows? I mean, it's like we're in a James Bond novel or some like disaster novel or something like that. We're living it.
Right.
But to kind of answer your question, I want to tell people in America to go out and buy all the toilet tissue that they need. That's my public service announcement.
Right. Right.
That's the most important thing on the
That's the
list.
headline. Right.
You shouldn't even be able to move in your house. You'll have a little pathway and toilet tissue everywhere.
You move each one out the way, like
Right.
Tetris.
Like Tetris. Yeah, exactly. Um, no, you know, I think people recognizing the importance of, being able to have good hygiene, right?
Mm.
You hear in a lot of like different survival books and things of that nature, hygiene has been something that people have talked about, but I don't think people have really recognized the importance of hygiene. I've talked to
Mm.
people who are survivalists and they, or survival people or into preparedness. And I'm like, what do you have? And they're like, oh, I have this and I have that and I have this and I have that. And I was like, well, how are you going to stay clean? And they're like,
Right.
oh, yeah, I didn't
Right.
think that. But now we're seeing like hygiene is like a thing, like washing your
Right.
hands, having hand sanitizer, stuff like
And like
that.
you said before,
Mhm.
that goes along with having enough water for your hygiene.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, I mean the mental aspect of preparedness is hard enough on people who don't think about it, and then you add all the pressures, and people panic, and people lose resources, or they lose their job, or something physically happens to them where their health is in danger. That adds on the pressure and stress of people's mental capacity to handle things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
And especially if you haven't done that before. So I always tell people to take a chance, go out and do something uncomfortable,
yeah.
so they can understand what that's like. If you live your whole life in a very comfortable position, unless you just have a very unique personality, you're not going
Right.
to be able to adapt and overcome when things like this happen.
Right.
Um, and so it's very important to go out and make yourself uncomfortable a little
Yeah.
bit, work outside of your boundaries so that you can see
Right.
how you respond to those things and build some mental fortitude to deal with the different
Mm.
aspects of surviving,
Yeah.
anything. This year has been super tough on me personally. I've lost quite a bit of family members. Have lost my 13-year long German Shepherd dog, died in my arms in my living room. Had a flood in the house. I mean, my business had to
Yeah.
shut down for a
It
while.
comes on the pressures.
Yeah, yeah. But people have been saying, man, you're taking it really good, and I'm like, because I've been to China in the Tibetan plateau, like where it was just walking
Right. Right.
amongst Tibetan people with like nothing but a yurt and a stove, like a metal stove that they
Right.
can, throw some yak dung in and heat their yurt up.
Mm-hmm.
But they were the happiest people ever. And
Yeah.
those experiences, as difficult as they were, God gave me the opportunity to recognize that it's your perception of
Mm-hmm.
your reality that
Right.
really dictates how you deal with it. Yes, there are things that suck, but
Right.
you, but your perception really tells you about, how you're going to perceive that suck. Yeah,
Right.
this sucks, but I can make it through versus this sucks, the whole world ends, I just need to sit here and die. Like there's a different
Right.
person,
Yeah.
like you say, mentality, right? The prepared
Right.
mentality is one that understands how to deal with the different aspects of our humanness, right? And
Right.
how we keep
Yeah.
ourselves alive.
Yeah. And it's very important because it's if people don't have the training or the mental capacity to deal with scenarios such as these, it's very hard. Even during normal circumstances, and then you put a disaster on top of that, or you put, a pandemic on top of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I encourage people to get some type of training. Like you said, go out there and be uncomfortable, and I think that's what hits it on the nail, because if we go out there and we are uncomfortable, then when we have situations that really make us uncomfortable, we're ready for that scenario, and we trained our body, we trained our mind. We're not panicking, we're not stressed out,
Mm-hmm.
and we're able to conquer whatever that is that can come our way in the challenge.
Yeah, yeah. When I went to SEER school in the Army, that was super difficult. These guys beat you, they interrogate you,
Mm-hmm.
they put you through all this type of pressure. Um,
Right.
and when I got out of that, I remember every time something came up that was
Mm-hmm.
difficult, I said, I made it through SEER school. I made it.
Right.
I would say that in my mind, like, I made it through SEER school. Yeah, this sucks, but I made it through SEER school, and that really sucks, So,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it,
I can
and it,
imagine.
I always had that to reach back to as a means to
Mhm.
kind of keep me alive. And then when I went on, and probably the other than going to war, the third most overwhelming thing that I did in my life was being on Naked and Afraid. So when I went to Naked and Afraid, that became kind of the new thing that I would fall back on. I'd be like, hey, I was naked in the Himalayan mountains with nothing. Like, it's not that bad,
Right.
like,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
it's like this
Like we've
sucks,
been through worse.
that sucks. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so those experiences become experiences again that build up your foundation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That gives you another step on the rung. So as if I'm standing on my normal foundation and the water starts to rise and it starts to overflow that foundation, I have a step there that I can step on. And if it gets a
Right.
little high and starts to overwhelm that step, I have another step I can step on. And all of
Mm-hmm.
those are my experiences. Those experiences become steps on my normal foundation that I'm able to
Yeah,
climb one step higher to deal with the next threshold of um, challenge, right? And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that kind of
No, that's good. I mean, getting the challenges you said before about the civil unrest aspect and the political aspect. What do you see as far as the future for America per se? Do you see things getting worse, or do you see things getting better as
mm.
far as people preparing and surviving in this climate? What are your thoughts?
um so I think it can go either way. So there is definitely, in my opinion, being an ex psyop guy, there's definitely a lot of manipulation going on out there, and I'm not just to make this clear, because people like to project their beliefs on me or whoever you
Right,
are. So I'm
right,
not saying left or right, because I've
right.
had this conversation where I'm like, there's a lot of manipulation, and immediately somebody's like, yeah, that person or that person. I'm like, I didn't say that. I
Yeah,
said
right.
there's a lot of manipulation. I didn't say it was who, or I didn't point at anybody. That's your projection of what I'm saying. So I want to preface it with that, and say that there's a lot of things happening. So because there's a lot of forces out there
Mhm.
working in very decisive manners, it's tough to figure it out. It's tough to know how it's going to go. Because one of the key tenets um, to my training when I was in the Army, PSYOP, is you set the conditions for people to make the decisions that you want them to make, but they make them based on their own choice, their own decision process. So you're just setting the conditions. So it's like I want this person to learn how to swim. This is going back to an old television show with I can't remember this old cowboy. He was a famous movie actor, something Wayne or something like that. I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. John Wayne. You know John Wayne? Right. John Wayne. So there's a movie where he walks up to the kid, and the kid's like, I can't get in that water. I don't know how to swim. And he picks up the kid and he throws him in the water. And the parents are like, oh my God, my kid's going to drown. And he's like, no, I don't know how to swim. And the kid figures it out, right? He starts doing the doggy paddle. And so he set the condition for this kid to kind of make the choice to learn how to swim. And it's kind of like that, but it's a little bit more subtle. And so because of that, you have really all these people making these choices because the conditions have been set for them to make those choices. And so it's really tough now to figure out like which way it's going to go because, there's still some uncertainties out there. What if another wave comes of COVID? What if the election doesn't go the way one side or the other side feels like? Maybe some people will just suck it up and say, okay, well, this is what happens in a free country. We make the election. I don't like it, but let me go and lick my wounds. We'll come back another day. Or you could have a person who sets a condition or a group that sets a condition for a bunch of people to get upset and go out and start shooting some stuff and doing some stuff. And nobody knows how that's going to turn out. And so, I would say for people to make sure you have your ducks in a row when it comes to anything you need from the supply chain. So the supply chain would be the supermarket or whatever. Anything you think you would need on a consistent basis over the course of several months, go out and make sure you have that. When you go to the grocery store, as long as it's not a perishable item, I would get double of whatever I get. And I just keep that process going for however long until one day we wake up and everything is good and we have change at the grocery store again and ammo is back in the store again and nobody's out on the streets, doing stuff and maybe one day and kids are back in school, back to normal. But until that point, I would just assume that we just don't know. We don't know how it's going to go. Because like, for instance, ammo, if you're not a shooter, you would not know this, but there's a shortage on ammo right now. And there's a multitude of reasons why that could be. But one is that, because of the pandemic, you have factories that used to be packed with like thousands of people who no longer can be packed with thousands of people. So now it's like only 100 people. So the amount of production that 100 people can get following the guidelines set by the pandemic is a lot lower than the production level of those who are on that, when you have 1,000 people working towards it. So therefore, the supply is low, right? The demand is high, but the supply is low, not because people can't do it. Now, if you just push that out amongst all the different, the people who make this, people who give you the still, the people who ship the still, the people who actually make the bullets, the people who get the gunpowder. If all those factories are operating in the same way, then that means that there's going to be less supply available because they can only produce so much. The people, we the people who buy it are still here trying to buy it at the same rate of speed, but they can no longer make it at the same rate of speed because they are limited to the amount of people that they can have. Now, if we take that and we move that to a supermarket or, for a meat factory or, now all of a sudden, or a tissue factory, right? Now all of a sudden you have things not making it to the store, and
Yeah.
you're not sure what to do because you didn't have the foresight to actually prepare these things and get these things ready, or
Yeah.
to have enough to make it until the next time they can get it there. And so
Yeah.
I would just say, don't be greedy. There's no reason
Mm.
to go to the store and like punch somebody in the face over the last roll of toilet tissue, especially in
Right.
especially in a very volatile society. You might just get shot, over
Yeah.
toilet tissue, which is ridiculous. Um,
Got to choose your battles.
yeah, exactly. So just say,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? Third world countries, they don't, they wipe their hands with their butts, or
Right.
I could always jump in the shower. It's not worth me,
Yeah.
shooting a person, or them shooting me, or us fighting
Mm.
to the death over it. Let me just let it
Mm.
go. But to avoid that, I would say again, get, an extra, the things you need the most. If you have super bad allergies, go out and buy, the next time you get your allergy medication, buy a second one, and just do that
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah. No, that's good. So because you have combat and martial arts experience, what are some things that people should be aware of as far as that is concerned, going out into these environments where there is civil unrest, people are, very edgy, you don't really know what people's reactions are going to be. What are some key skills or key things that you can give people to kind of be aware and protect themselves?
That's a good question. Um, so I've trained I've been training since I was in martial arts since I was 8 years old. So I have some years in it now. I think like 33 or 34. I gotta do the math. But it's a long time. So,
Yeah.
and I've trained in everything from jujitsu to boxing to kickboxing to taekwondo, kung fu, karate do, kali, silat. And now, the ninja concept was one that was very uh, powerful for me, because the ninja actually didn't want to fight. They weren't fighters, they could fight. They were very
Right.
deadly, but they were more espionage artists than they actually were fighters, right? So the idea was, how do I get information and stay out of danger? Because they were
Right.
outnumbered and overwhelmed. And so it was like,
Right.
the sheer idea that I could die would mean like I would be equivalent to like 10 or 20 of the opposition, because they have so many people and we have so few people. So if I get into an engagement and I don't come out of that alive, then my
Mm.
clan just lost the equivalent of 20 people and me. So
Yeah.
I'd rather just get information and not be where you guys are going to be. And so
Right.
that's one of the first principles. Actually, it's the second. In our school, we teach everyone who comes in, we teach them, a few principles. And the first two, in an intro class, is the first one is pay attention to what people say and what they do. Very important to pay attention to what people say, not just what they do, and vice
Right.
versa. And then also, or even better yet, pay attention to the environment. And then the next piece is, wherever there's danger, I'm not there. And the way we know where there's danger is to pay attention to what's happening in the world, right?
Right. Right.
And so I would recommend for people from a martial arts standpoint is that, yes, you do have emotions. Yes, protesting is okay. And that's an important part of our society, is to go out and
Right.
protest. You know, but there's also that line of when it can become dangerous to your life and health, and you have to recognize when that is. Um,
Yeah.
and so you have to always stay paying attention and actively paying attention to how the environment is changing around you.
Yeah.
Make a very well thought out decision on if you want to go and do that. If you say, I really believe in why we're protesting, I need to be out there. Okay, that's cool. But know the factors going into that. Is there going to be like a group of people there in opposition that they have violent tendencies, and
Right.
and how far do you want to go with that? Maybe it's better to do it on another day when that group's not going to be there, or maybe it's better to protest in a different way. So I would say just be very mindful of, of those things. Pay attention to those things. That's the PSYOP way as well. That's why I went into PSYOP in the Army, is because, yeah, I was tactical PSYOP, so we could fight really well, but, it's too many, it takes too much energy and resources to actually physically run around shooting stuff, and blowing stuff up. But, we can just, again, set those conditions for people to do the things that we need them to do, but them to believe that it's their choice. That would be way better.
Right.
And, now it's easier than ever. We see it with these memes online all the time. People like sharing, they'll see a meme about something, they're sharing it, and then everybody gets all upset about it, and they're like sharing it here, and all these emotions, and that moves people to action, right? And so it's like, dude, some like young person in their room with a Pop-Tart made that meme, and now a whole movement is started behind it. People are actually taking action. So that's the true efficiency of, how you operate in an environment, is so you think about those things.
Yeah, no, very good points. It's some things that I didn't even think about too. So I'm gonna give you a fun question here. What's the difference, in your opinion, between urban survival and wilderness survival?
That's beautiful. Yeah, I had somebody ask me that not long ago. So urban survival, there's two main factors that's very different than wilderness survival. One, in urban survival, you have a lot of infrastructure. So you have a lot of stuff. Does that make sense? And if you understand, and you have stuff that really makes your life easy, because that's how the urban environment is designed, right? It just took whatever we need to survive, and it made it a lot easier for us. We have shelters, they have insulation, they have heating and air conditioning, they have metal pipes, they have water, all those different things. So even if all that was to break down, we're still, we're still a leg up, in the game. It's like we got a shirt on, they just took our jacket away from us, so, but we still got a shirt, so we're a lot better. In the wilderness environment, especially if you're not used to being out there, a lot of the infrastructure you have to create on your own. It is the landscape. And for instance, if you're looking for shelter, unless you find a cave or some big tree that fell over that I can scoot up under or something of that nature, I have to build that infrastructure. And then I have to understand how to do that, and I have to understand where to get the water from, and then I have to understand whether it's clean or not, and then I have to understand how to purify it and all that stuff. So there's a lot less infrastructure. In an urban environment, there are, unlike the wilderness environment, in the wilderness environment, you have predators, but most predators don't want to mess with human beings, right? They're not really into like hanging out. Most of them. I mean, there's obviously cases where mountain lions are attacking people and stealing babies, and bears will mess you up pretty bad, and snakes will get you, and spiders may get you. But the most part, a lot of that stuff tries to stay away from us as human beings. In the urban environment, you have the most intelligent animal that you can ever find in the face of the planet, which is the human being. And you are at the mercy of their mindset, right? If you have a bunch of criminals that live in your area, those guys and girls are gonna come and take what they need if something bad goes down. If you have a bunch of really nice people, but then they get really hungry, and what makes it even worse is, unlike an animal, which animals are they can be intelligent, but they're not as intelligent as humans. So I can put up a wall, and probably the animal, unless it just uses brute strength, is not going to spend a lot of time trying to get me, but a human being will, right? And because they can think through the issues, they'll think through the issues and the problems that they want it bad enough. I mean, you got people in prisons making some of the greatest inventions. I was watching this one show on Netflix where the prisoners, they were in a multi-level prison, and they had women on one level and guys on another, and they were tying together ripped t-shirts or toilet tissue and they were passing notes through the toilet to one another.
Wow.
So like,
Wow.
yeah, so they would take this thing and they would make like a long rope with it. They put a note at the end. They would drain all the water out of the toilet, put it down there, take fresh water, put it on top, flush it, and then they just kind of know how it would go through the piping system, and it would come up in the 2 decks below or 2 floors below. And like, I mean, you can watch this thing on Netflix. It's like, who figured that out? Because the guards didn't tell you to do that, right?
Right.
So the guards didn't come in and say, hey, you guys, if you want to communicate, here's what you do. You got to build this thing, and this is how our plumbing system is set up so you can communicate. Yeah. So you literally had, I watched the show, I mean, it was magnificent. I mean, you had this guy talking to this girl on another floor, her passing a message back to this guy, all through the toilet system, through the plumbing system. So that tells you how inventive, how creative, how determined the human being and the human mind can be if it really wants to get something done. That's the biggest issue that we would have, that we have in the urban environment that we don't necessarily have in the wilderness environment. You know, and that is now when a long time ago when cities weren't really a thing, and or villages were really small, you know, and we were living mostly in a wilderness environment. Guess who the biggest threat was then? Human beings, right? Now those human beings have moved. You know, you had tribes killing other tribes, and you know, like, and stealing from other people and taking other people out, and and so now that's just moved from that ancient wilderness environment to now this modern urban environment, because that's where most of the people are, you know.
Right. No, that's awesome. I mean, this is all good stuff. I mean, I just want to pick your brain with these questions and see how far we can go down the rabbit hole. But I hope people got some type of resource, some type of knowledge and training from this video, and some things that they can implement themselves at home. Just simple things. So that was the goal for our talk today. And before we get out of here, just tell the people, you know, what you got going on, what's coming up.
Oh yeah, so I have in about 2 months I'll be releasing a book called Disaster Ready, which is a new book that I've been working on, and it kind of
gets 2 books out.
Yeah, I actually have 4 books out, but my 2. So let me tell about those. So my first book I wrote in my 20s is called the I Choose to Act. It's a woman's self-defense book. I'm gonna redo it because it's outdated now. This was like, I released that book in 2002 or 3 or something like that. So it was a long time ago. And then my second book was a book called Modern Hand-to-Hand Combat. And when I was in Army, because I had done a lot of research on the Japanese perspective of warfare, they wore body armor, and they had whole schools based around fighting in body armor. But those schools kind of died off, or that knowledge was only passed down, you know, through small circles, because nobody was wearing Japanese samurai armor anymore.
Right.
But my teacher taught me about that, and so I used that to help, that in my military experience, to help me write a book about taking some of those principles and using them and adapting them so that we can fight in body armor today. And so Modern Hand-to-Hand Combat is my second book. My third book is called Ninja Survival, and that's from the wilderness perspective. And again, the ninja were very keen on this idea of the human psyche and the human mind and spirit, and how that unified with their ability to operate in the physical realm, right? And so I talk a lot about that, because we can all like write a book on how to start a fire and like how to build a shelter. And it's very, very cool stuff out there, but you know, a lot of it kind of overlaps. But where the ninja were unique was that they were a group of people who were focused on understanding the mind and living off the land. And because of that, because they were a group of people living in the woods, and they weren't a part of normal society, the powers that be at the time were threatened by that, all right? Because if I'm a emperor or a shogun or something, I control everything but this random group of people up in the woods, and they're doing some weird things that nobody really
Right.
understands. And so we need to tell those guys they need to follow what we do, and if they don't, then we need to wipe them out because I can't control them. I don't know. That kind of concept is what birthed the ninja pathway
Mm.
when it came down to combat. And because they understood human beings so well, that helped them develop a really formidable combat system. So that's my ninja survival. And then I have one last book, which is called Tales of a Modern Ninja Kid. And what as ninja practitioners, we have a 14-point code of mindful action that was passed down from generations. I received it from my teacher, Stephen Hayes. And I talk about this 14 points, but in a story format where this one kid is kind of going through these different issues in this one day, and these different 14 points pop up in these interactions that this kid is having throughout his day, and it kind of gives people a realistic view of how to apply that 14-point code in a way that can be beneficial to their lives versus just saying the code and not really understanding how it relates to them. So that's my newest one, and then like I said, I have the new book Disaster Ready that'll be out in about two months. And so there'll be anyone could find anything about me on Hakim Hakim dash Isler ISLER.com, Hakim dash Isler.com, or they can go to my Instagram, Hakim the Black MacGyver, or my Facebook, Hakim Isler, or whatever. So Hakim Isler, you type that in, a bunch of stuff will pop up. So,
Awesome. Are there any new shows you're gonna be on appearing in anytime soon?
Yeah, so airing, and this is really weird. It's a really weird thing right now. I mentioned earlier that I went to China, and I filmed this show called First Man Out, where I competed against another survivalist. And we had to race this distance, and we had to survive along the way. And it's supposed to be airing on the Discovery Channel. It was supposed to be this month, but we can't really get in contact with the people in charge of the scheduling, and then it was on their schedule, and now it's not on their schedule. So if you went to Discovery, so we're not really sure what's happening with it right now. But that's the next one that I'm going to be on.
Cool, awesome. So yeah, guys, you heard it. Go to his website, go check him out. Even Google him if you have to. But thank you guys for tuning in this discussion, and hopefully we're gonna have plenty more information and more discussions in the future here on Live.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Before you leave, I want to tell everybody, Darius came to me, and he's like, super cool young man doing something really amazing. And I wish I had the reach and the ability to do that when I was his age. And I just want to give you a shout out. I think what you're doing is really amazing. And when you get to my age, you're going to be like, Super Saiyan 4 or something like that. Like right now you're at Super Saiyan, but you're going to be Saiyan 4 because you started so early, So doing what you're doing, I really appreciate you. And I think that I just wanted to say that and verbalize that out there, that I'm really proud of you as individuals.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show again. But guys, that wraps it up before they kick us out of here. But this is Prepare Mentality. It's Hakim Isler, the Black MacGyver. Be safe, be healthy, stay blessed.